Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and this is my co-host, Scott Daly.
Matt, before you stands three choices. Choice A, you make a really good podcast today, but for a long time after, your podcasts really suck. Also, I die. Choice B, thousands of people die, including people you know. But in the long run, Doof Media becomes the greatest media platform the world has ever seen. Choice number C. We delay the podcast for one night, causing unbelievable torture for one of our Doof partners. But there's a good chance that all future podcasts will be pretty good. Choose.
So just to be clear, I'm not going to die in any of these, right?
Well, I mean,
I'm pretty indifferent. It's fine. Whichever. So how are you doing?
This is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of useless wardens, trolley problems from hell, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week, Victoria, recovering from her physical wounds while ignoring her mental ones, decides to keep going forward, right into the cell of our favorite I win button, Contessa. Contessa spoils Victoria's victory party by giving our heroes the worst set of choices ever. Matt, how did you feel about these two chapters?
I mean, this is one of my favorite things about this story, honestly, is these moral conundrums that are put upon our characters and the interplay between not just thinking what would I do, but understanding like the psychology of each of these characters well enough that you can try to imagine what they would think.
Yeah.
And then you think about like determinism and all these other ideas that are interesting to think about, and just the fate and whether you would even accept something like this in the first place. It's just so rich.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And one of the things that the story has been doing in this arc that we've kind of talked about in the past is that every time there's like a point, like an uncrossable line, the book then says, okay, well, here's a scenario in which it seems like crossing it is the right thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the idea of leaving people without food or water or food or showers for however amount of time it takes to get through this battle. Then the decision to kill someone. Then we're thrown this wonderful curveball. And it's just like our heroes are continuously pummeled with these situations where under maybe other circumstances, the answer to these things is cut and dry. It's easy. No, that's bad. That's a bad thing. It's bad. No. And now it's like, well, maybe. Right. And I think that's a challenge for us reading the story, but it's also, as you said, a challenge for every one of our characters. And I think we're going to attempt to answer the question, what would you do? But I agree, to me, that the most interesting question here is, what are our characters going to do?
Yep.
And why?
I think that's true. I mean, there's also the sense in which between Worm and Ward, I've basically gone from being someone who called themselves utilitarian to someone who's just like, I don't know.
I think that's so funny because I think a lot of people would read Worm and be like, yeah, look, utilitarian ethics. Case A, right?
I mean, that's in there. But it's not so cut and dried, I would say.
No, I agree. I totally agree. To the chagrin of a lot of people, I agree. But anyway, I can't wait to talk about them. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think as difficult as these choices are and as emotionally draining as this situation is, I think it's going to be a fun conversation to have.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure.
So is this happened? Yes. So
yeah. Yes.
So this week we announce that Media MD, which is run by the fellas who do Deep Impact, Elliot and Ruben, that their other podcast, Media MD, has also joined the Doof Network. So now if you donate to our Patreon account, you'll also be donating to their Media MD podcast and helping to support that as well. And we're really excited to have them on board.
Yeah, we've been working with these guys for about the past 6 months now, and we knew they had another show, and we kind of started with one to start slow, right? And everything's been going great, so we thought, why not? Let's bring in their other show. We love them, we love what they do, and we think you will too. So yeah, really, really strongly urge you to check out Media MD. It's a media analysis podcast that happens every 2 weeks or every fortnight, as the Australians say. Basically, where one of them prescribes a certain piece of media to the other that they haven't seen before. They spend 2 weeks watching it, and they come back and they talk about how they thought about it, and then they just kind of take turns back and forth. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. I mean, if you listen to Deep Impact, you'll love these guys. So You'll love them discussing some non-packed things.
Yeah, and I like kind of the framing device of their Media MD show.
Yeah, I do too.
And it's one of those shows where I really do recommend just go over to the channel and like scroll through their past history and listen to any that jump out at you, because surely you'll see some movie or show or whatever that that interests you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. May I recommend the Rocky episode where you can hear my beautiful voice,
or the Pulp Fiction episode where one Matt Freeman is a guest.
I'm still mad about the score that they gave Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
We almost canceled the relationship right there. It was over. Anyway, yeah, go check out Media MD. You can see their first new podcast on doofmedia.com right now. I don't think we've got the backlog on there yet. That's a very tall, long order. So, but from now on, you'll be able to see every single one of those episodes on doofmedia.com.
Yeah. All right, Scott, let's get into these chapters.
Let's do it.
So 15.6 opens up. And, last week you talked about how starting a chapter in media res in combat gave us a sense that the battle was just huge and chaotic. Now we're going in the opposite direction because Victoria is telling us that it's quiet. It's been quiet for 10 minutes. There's this calm, and you can't help but think it's quiet, too quiet.
Yeah, it's our first real lull in the fighting since the arc began, excepting the interlude that we started with. And while that's like a good thing, and then it gives Victoria a breather and like an opportunity to metaphorically get that force field back up that we talked about last week. Yeah. It also makes all of our characters kind of sit with their wounds, both physically and mentally. They're just, when the battle quiets down, you're stuck with your thoughts and you're stuck with the way you feel. And maybe the physical shock that's protecting you from feeling your injuries goes away, but the mental shock that's protecting you from the implications of the things you've just done also starts to fade a little bit. And that's kind of where we pick up with our characters.
Yeah. I think there really is something to that idea of her having a kind of mental and physical shield that protects her in the moment and then leaves her bereft afterward. We're going to see some more shield imagery by the end of these chapters.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Siren, in advanced guard cape, looks over Victoria's wounds, which makes us aware of their extent. She's got bruising from the gunshot impact to her breastplate. She's got bruising from skimming the ground while flying. I don't even remember that happening. She's re-damaged her flensed hand, and she's just really exhausted.
Yeah.
And she insists that she's fighting okay and that she has good instincts, bring up that instincts thing. But Siren thinks that she should turn back.
I really love this recurring beat of instincts. I think it's been a fabulous kind of through line since the beginning of, was it only last arc? Jesus. It feels like it was so long ago. Feels like that Victoria was a lifetime ago. The one that playfully sparring with Annalise while imagining them in the shower. Oh God, that was so long ago. Yeah, but I mean, I do think that she's kind of gotten to a place where she trusts those instincts a little bit better. There's this whole conversation about like she certainly believes that she trusts the ability that she's not going to like go too far. She's just worried about hurting her friends and hurting the people around her. But she seems like relatively okay with her not her state of mind, but with her ability to keep that in check.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I don't have her exact phrasing in front of me, but it was something along the lines of like the worst that could happen is I would hurt one of my friends, and I immediately latch onto that as like I don't know if that's the worst thing that could happen, Victoria. That's one of those monkey paw type statements, I think.
Sure, yeah, and I wonder if that's like a little image of her state of mind too. That like that's a real bad thing, but like she's so like in tuned with the horror of the situation that like in the moment that doesn't seem that bad, because like the alternative is everybody dies.
Yeah, that's true. She's definitely normalized a certain level of risk. I think, in most of the prior battles to this one, that would have been, beyond the pale. And now it's basically a case where she really believes anyone could die here, and things are dire enough that it's better for someone to be injured than for someone to be dead. So the risk is worth it.
Yeah. There's a small moment here where she says she doesn't even realize how bad the wounds were until she tried to like sit down with her team, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of hits her all at once. And I think that goes into what we were talking about before about like what this lull provides them. And again, I go back to that wonderful shield imagery that you defined last week of this idea that like, yeah, it takes the hit, but then it shatters after and you're left defenseless. So she's kind of left defenseless at this moment. And because she's Victoria, that shield will regenerate. She will bring it back up, right? It will happen eventually. It just takes some time in between those big hits. And she needs these moments for that.
Yeah, right. She needs a metaphorical minute to lean on Crystal and then stand up and pull herself together.
Yeah. And I really like, I like this stuff with Siren. I think it's really interesting because first of all, we have this guy who she's much more comfortable with him because he doesn't have any healer power, right? Like he's just like a cape that's just doing just standard medical attention stuff, like normal non-powers related stuff. Just the old fashioned way of like poking and prodding. And she's okay with that. Not kind of Amy, but it's very like the whole framing of the scene's really interesting because she's in this wide open area. A door is open and she's kind of hiding behind the door. Her armor's off. Her top is off. She's pretty exposed. And Siren is staring at her, like, and it makes her uncomfortable. And she, in this moment, says that she's just going to push herself deeper into the mindset she maintained in the hospital when she was letting nurses take care of her. Privacy didn't happen when you needed someone else to look after your health. And I love this moment where she's basically saying, I'm just going to push myself into this mindset that I had in one of the worst times in my life, right? Like that's, in order to survive this moment, I need to push deeper. And I love like deeper into that mindset to me implies that she's already in that mindset a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
And she just needs to go a little bit further into it.
I think that is a very intentional word choice. I think that ever since the moment when Amy touched her, she's been in that wretch mindset. And yeah, this is absolutely going deeper, not just, it's not just, I mean, normally these thoughts are very repellent to her and she avoids going there at all. I think the fact is she's been there for this whole arc.
Yeah.
And that's, one thing we were talking about earlier on chat is the idea that she's relatively passive in these chapters. And part of that is like, yeah, she kind of declared Master Stranger on herself. But I think that was almost instrumental because, I mean, she did that so that she wouldn't have to make any decisions partially. Like
right.
she's not in a headspace where she should be making decisions. It has nothing to do with Master Stranger.
Oh boy, let's this seems like the perfect time to give her a big old decision.
Yeah. Most important decision ever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Perfect.
I agree. And I think everything we've worked up to leading up to this big moment in the next chapter is doing that. I think you're absolutely right. The hanging back version of Victoria, the uncertain version of Victoria, the one that's reminding herself of Master Stranger is all leading up to this moment where someone appears in front of you and says, sorry, you have to choose between three terrible options. And that's your only choice.
Yeah.
Anything else is worse than any of these three terrible things. And yeah, I mean, that's awful. That's awful. One of the other things I really like is like like this is kind of set up to make you think this guy's kind of leering at her, because I think that's what she thinks at first, right? Like she, like we said, armor off, top off, and he's just staring at her, and she's uncomfortable. And he's a guy named Siren, which I don't want to read too much into that. Like he's kind of playing off both meanings of the word, right? He's got the red and blue like motif of like the emergency siren stuff, but also like the sea monster siren, which were things that lured sailors to their death with beautiful enchanting music. Right. So like there is a little bit. I think that just the fact that he's that siren like supports the kind of leering type of read of this, but it turns out that's wrong, right? Like he's not looking at her boobs. He's not looking at her chest. He's looking at her swollen side and how bad it is.
Yeah. And I take Victoria kind of at face value when she realizes like, oh no, he was just looking at her injury, which, you know, it doesn't come off weird at all. But
I think that brief moment before that, where you kind of, the book's kind of, I think wants you to think that for a brief moment. It wants you to think, oh, ew. Yeah. I think that puts you in Elise's I just read my wife's name on a chat. Puts you in Victoria's mindset, where she's just uncomfortable. Like, and she's just scared and uncomfortable and freaked out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't sure how exactly to nail down the mental movement that's happening there, because she goes from it's fine. I could just go into the headspace where I kind of dissociate from my body and don't take any of this personally. And then almost immediately after that, she takes it personally.
Yeah.
But she's wrong to. She's taking it's just showing how uncomfortable she is right now in general.
I think even in this coping mechanism she has, there are limits, right? Like she can disassociate to an extent, but when you're presumably in your underwear and a dude's staring at you, like you're going to jump to conclusions a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. There's a couple more things with this conversation I wanted to focus on, though, because there's this moment where she's trying to convince Siren, which is interesting because Siren has basically said, I don't think you should go. I think you should go back. And she's like, but you can't like make me. And it's like, yeah, you're right. Like he's not her doctor. He doesn't report to anyone she's reporting to. His opinion doesn't really matter in like order sense. Like she could just ignore it, but she still feels the need to convince him, which I think is interesting. And I think that goes into Victoria's like propensity to reach out. Like she doesn't want to make this decision on her own. She wants help making this decision. She wants someone else to tell her, yes, you can go forward.
Yeah. Or, you know, maybe she wants like if she is going to take herself out of the fight, the only way she would do that would be if someone made just a decisive argument, you know, oh, you know, Victoria, you're missing a limb and you're bleeding out and you're going to bleed out and be dead soon. Yeah. Like that, be anything other than that, she can argue back against. And because it's not at that level, she's like, oh, good, then I'm right to stay.
Right.
Yeah,
but in this moment where she's trying to convince him of this kind of stuff and they're talking back and forth, she says, I don't have as many years of experience at holding back. And his response is, ex-vigilante. And like, she doesn't do well with that, right? Like, because she specifically defines a vigilante in this moment as heroes who eschewed the game in favor of putting enemies down for the long term, if not permanently. People that tended to break the unwritten rules, right? And this is so great because on the first of all, she killed someone last week, right?
Yeah.
So she did put an enemy down for the long term. Second of all, the whole long term thing has been her kind of, you know, modus operandi for the last couple arcs. This kind of decision to say we have to think about like making decisions that last, like a permanent decision, right? Yeah. That's been the thing that she's been focusing on, and this guy kind of lays that out as, oh, that's being a vigilante, and that's what you're doing right now.
And also, I mean, she smashed a few people. She threw somebody into a hill. She's done some attempts at permanent solutions, certainly.
Yeah. And I mean, it also framing Victoria in that way, framing Glory Girl in particular, because what she's saying is here, I don't have as many years of experience at holding back. What she's saying is, I didn't hold back when I was Glory Girl. Mm-hmm. And so for him to say, oh, that was when you were in your vigilante stage, is also kind of like, no, I was a hero.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think it's just like, it's inadvertently like attacking Victoria right where she lives.
It's great. It's a great moment because you can imagine her almost like opening her mouth and then shutting it again. The text doesn't say she does that.
Yeah.
I like that about this interaction, actually, where she says something that catches him off guard and she kind of takes it back. And then he comes back with this, and he's not even trying to get in a dig. This is just his assumption. And then it takes her off guard, and she can't really say anything back to it. It's just a fun, like, moment of dialogue. I like the parallelism of it. It's cool.
I agree. I totally agree. It's great. I like the siren guy.
Yeah, he's cool. Hope he doesn't die horribly.
Please don't.
So Swansong and Tress are listening in from nearby, and they also support her decision to stay. Yeah,
and I like that Swansong, in supporting her decision, is like, well, I'm staying, so she should stay, and I'm like really super injured. And I think Victoria's decision here makes a certain amount of sense, right? Like, that no matter which way they go, they're going to have to be fighting someone. Like, if they go back, they're going to have to be battling outward with injured people with them. And so Victoria, I think, has kind of framed this thing as we've already passed the point of no return thing. Like, we have to go forward. Forward is the only way. And I think it feels like in this moment, she's being told by Siren specifically, but I think by the book at large, like, it's not actually too late. Like, you can still turn back, you can hang back, you can realize that you're too hurt physically and maybe mentally to go forward in this thing, and they can't. And the response, the effect of that choice is, okay, you're gonna go forward. Well, here's the worst decision ever. Congratulations. Yeah. You chose to go forward. You could have backed out. You chose to go forward, and now you have to do this, right?
Yeah, narratively, it 100% feels like this is the last moment when you could turn back.
Right.
And you've chosen not to, and now we're just going full steam ahead from here. There's not going to be any other moment that feels like you could get out. You could plausibly back out of this. Sure. It doesn't feel like that to the extent that it takes you out of the story, but you certainly get that sense of like, well, we've been through this terrible battle. We've got a lot of injured people. We've got a lot of dead people, and we're moving on from here. And what that tells us is these characters are not going to back down. And now we know that.
Yep. And then so I think that's important framing too, when you go into the Sophie's Choice from Hell, that is coming up.
Yeah, right. So I just love this bit where Victoria's thinking about Ashley. They're talking about the Sheen vials that they have, and Ashley mentions that she would love to take one, and Victoria kind of acts like she's surprised, and Ashley says, "More power, of course." Her tone was casual Ashley. No sign of the shocked, lost Ashley I'd seen before everyone had regrouped and gathered here. But of course there wouldn't be. I'd made the mistake before of thinking there was a villainous Ashley behind the mask of the hero, or a heroic Ashley behind the mask of the villain. There wasn't. Morality was an aesthetic, and that aesthetic came second to her drive to ascend. To look behind the mask meant to find the times that drive wasn't front and center.
Yeah, I really love this. I love this a lot. I loved reading this, and I loved thinking about it for a while. And we talked about Ashley. We talked about this moment, right, where Victoria is thinking back to this moment where she pondered about what was under the mask and what was under that mask. And we felt Victoria was wrong about Ashley, right? I think we said that in the moment, that I don't think her read at the time was a correct one. And Victoria kind of is admitting that here, that the assumption of, oh, behind this mask is a bad Ashley, or behind this mask is a good Ashley. And I think what the book is doing here is kind of kind of showing that she's more complicated than that, right? And I think this makes me think about, we had so many conversations during Worm and most of Ward about this concept of there's a person and there's their mask, right? But there's the person they show to the world, and then there's the person they are. And that's great, and I think it made for fascinating conversation and is a very interesting angle to look at people. But I also think people are a little more complicated than that, right? Like your personality cannot be distilled down to just the person you show to people and the person you really are, right? It's a little bit more complex than that. And Ashley's a little bit more complex than that. And she's, instead of going with this mask metaphor, we're going with this this kind of priority system, right? We're ranking her priorities of what she wants.
Yeah.
And while morality is a priority on her list, absolutely, it is not the primary one. And that's not saying that, that's not saying that Ashley's not good. Like, I first ruffled at this phrase, morality was an aesthetic, right? Because I was like, wait a minute. No, it's not just, to Ashley, morality is not just an aesthetic. I was like, well, but it kind of is. And I don't mean that in that, like, she doesn't have morality, right? I just mean that she prioritizes it in a different way than other people do. And, like, I think the thing we need to make clear here, and I think the thing that Tex is trying to make clear here, is not that Ashley has now become Swansong, and Swansong is this good, wonderful person, right? She's a complicated human being that has good traits and bad traits and has things she's suffering with, and she's not Clark Kent, right? Like, she didn't just pass a morality test and then became a paragon of virtue. Like, that's not the person she is. And I think sometimes we see, like, we want to track someone's progress and we say, oh, Ashley has ascended now and therefore always going to be good. And it's more complex than that.
Yeah. She turned good, as my kids say about
right.
about characters like Zuko who undergo a reformation.
Right.
I mean, my take on Ashley at this point is that the heroic and the villainous personae are both manifestations of the same underlying personal drive. And I think fundamentally, and this is maybe a bit cynical, but I think fundamentally she's driven by fear. She's driven by the trauma that happened to her when she was young and her whole childhood, really. And the villainous persona was a way of reacting to that fear by trying to make herself scary, unapproachable, not relying on anyone, not letting anyone get close to her, so that, and also in charge. And these were all things that she saw as being the qualities that would make her not need to feel that fear anymore.
Yeah.
And she lived through the experience of dying and experiencing that was a bad way of going about things. And so now she's trying a different tack now, and she's realized that there are other tools for dealing with that fear and all of the other consequences of that trauma that still resides in her. Now she does things like reach out to other people. She has friends. She has, you could call Kenzie a little sister surrogate, I suppose. She has people who rely on her. She has people that she relies on, and her drive to be strong manifests differently as well. And these are all just different ways where she's tried to channel her impulse. It's what Victoria calls an impulse to ascend, which is a positive way of phrasing it. My take is that it's an impulse to transcend that fear using this new set of tools, which, see, in my head, it doesn't actually seem cynical, although for some reason I feel like when I'm saying it sounds cynical. It's like, well, I mean, we're all driven by not necessarily the best motives. And I think that if we pursue our motives in healthy ways, then that can mean that we're transcending them and being true to ourselves, but also being moral.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, we've talked so much about the idea of choosing morality, choosing the quote unquote right thing or what you value as the right thing, is like action, like the whole actions speak louder than words thing, right? Like the idea and the fake it till you make it thing, right? Like the idea that there's power behind, even if morality isn't aesthetic, there's still power behind that. Like, like it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're doing this because it's a good look for you, or to complicate that, exactly what you said, that it's a manifestation of her her original fear and trauma, it doesn't matter because you're doing it, right? Like, I mean, like that's at the end of the day, like I like turn back at that idea that, like, you're saying, oh, the person isn't truly moral. It's just an aesthetic that they put on. But so, like, isn't that kind of true for everyone? Like, to a certain extent, like, what I mean, like, it kind of gets down to this idea of what is morality. If morality is important enough to you to define it as part of your aesthetic, then it means you care on a certain level.
Yeah, it's almost like to call something an aesthetic is almost to say that it doesn't have consequences,
right?
And to try to be a hero versus to try to be a villain result in a widely different set of consequences in real life. It's not just like, what are you going to wear, a red top or a black top, Ashley? It's, are you going to have friends or not? Are you going to go down the crock of shit path, or, I don't know, the Victoria path, it means something completely different to who you end up being at the end of the road. So, I don't know. It's definitely interesting. Like, this is one of those cases where I don't know if I agree with Victoria or not. I don't know if I agree or not. I think that it's more than an aesthetic to Ashley, but also I don't think that Ashley prioritizes morality for morality's sake. I think she prioritizes taking care of the people she cares about.
Sure.
And that kind of leads to her being a more heroic person.
Yeah, I mean, but there's something, right? Like, if all she does is care about the people she cares about, then she would not have had the reaction to accidentally killing a person.
That's true. Yeah.
So, like, she's a complicated character, and I think part of Victoria's journey to kind of figure her out is recognizing the, pardon my pun, not pun, but like Ashley is not black or white. Like that's what it is, and it's hilarious to say because that's like literally her aesthetic is black and white, but she's not. Like, it's more complex than that, and it's very difficult to just put her in a box or frame her in a certain way and say that's Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think it's more than a pun though, because like that's why Ashley is the kind of person who would go from an all black aesthetic to an all white aesthetic. She thinks in binary terms because that's how that enables her to clarify her worldview, but that doesn't mean that she is binary in that way.
Yeah, that's a great point. I totally agree. Yeah, perfect. That's a
cool.
perfect way to end it. Let's move on.
Okay. So they pass Stonewall's group, who are being patched up by a tinker with some kind of medical nanotechnology foam. And Sveta warns her against using that to help with her hand.
The power of foam returns to the parahuman universe.
Yep. Foam is a good pull, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that's interesting about this to me, Matt, is like Victoria has a very serious like healer problem, right? She's very uncomfortable and untrustworthy around healers. And I mean, I thought, and I think in the past it has extended to the kind of biotinker healing. And I think we've seen that kind of lesson over the course of the novel, especially, around the orchard decision with Sveta. But
yeah,
now she's like looking at this and she's got this moment of like, oh, I wish I could just have some of that stuff. It'd really help me. So I think we've seen that lesson and maybe be a little more focused. I mean, maybe her interactions with Amy like focused her ire specifically than just like, I'm afraid of any kind of thing that can heal me. It's now, no, just the healer types.
Yeah, that makes sense. And she's in this much more dire situation where I think maybe she's just prioritizing like surviving. But yeah, sure. That is an interesting point.
I mean, if there was, you say that prioritizing surviving, if this was a healer cape, not someone with some tinker foam, would she do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe not. I think that honestly, the fact that it was tinker stuff and not a direct healer cape might have bypassed her automatic kind of trigger response.
Yeah.
That was my assumption when I first read it. It was like, oh yeah, like it took her a second to even think of it as being a power.
Yeah, right.
So
cool stuff.
We were talking earlier about the idea that there are a lot of interesting parallels between this attack on the Cauldron base and the attack on the Cauldron base in Worm. And we were able to pull out a lot of interesting either parallels or sort of inversions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I don't know if we got to a point of saying that we figured out whether that was an intentional narrative trick done to make some point, or if it was just, well, okay, yeah, they happen to be attacking a Cauldron base, so you're gonna find some parallels inevitably. But like, I kind of made a short list. This is a short list. There are definitely more things to it, but like, a lot of the same people are here. You know, we've got certain of the Undersiders are here. Weld is definitely here. Svet is definitely here. Number Man plus his clones are here. Contessa is here. We don't have Taylor and her swarm, but we have Valkyrie and her flock. Tattletale's not physically here, just like she wasn't physically at the previous Cauldron invasion. I'm also imagining maybe Kinsey has some sort of parallel or mirrored role to Tattletale, because she is the breakthrough man in the chair character, whereas Tattletale is the Undersider man in the chair.
Yeah.
And then of course there's this idea that, you know, Scion and Eden were these two big presences at that first attack. And here we don't have Scion, we don't have Eden. We do have Teacher basically, according to everything, you know, trying to build a new entity. And I think the coolest thing that is sort of an inversion rather than a parallel is that Eden was like in the basement of the Cauldron headquarters, but Teacher's secret weapon is in the attic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can't help but notice the similarity between attic and the idea of heavens and all the heavenly imagery that we've been getting.
I love that, and I completely agree. I think it's really fascinating. Like, there's one of the things I think we're doing with this is next chapter we're going to get into this moral dilemma that is placed in front of our characters, where no answer is a good one. All of them seem bad. All of them result in pain and hurt and suffering, and suddenly this answer is thrust upon our characters. This kind of pure utilitarian choice is thrust on our characters, and that's very wormy, right? Like, that's just like that's the kind of thing that I think Worm focused on a little bit more than this book focuses on. So I agree that, you know, aesthetically, structurally, we are like returning to the previous book and the dilemmas of the previous book and the choices of the previous book. And one of the things I find so inherently fascinating with that, and we'll get there when we get there, is the idea that maybe this time we have a chance of making a different choice. Maybe this time we can do something different here. Because I do still think that one of the things that Worm is saying is that these utilitarian choices have the consequences of them are always worse than they look when you're thinking about them. And I mean, we have a character here, Sveta, that represents that perfectly. And I think, like, we're kind of going, we're not literally going back in time, but we're going back in time to this place. We're doing this again. What's going to happen this time? I think that feels intentional to me.
Yeah, right. I mean, I was kind of hung up on the literal level of like who is there, but yeah, there's definitely thematic. You know, it's a sequel, right?
Yeah,
it's a sequel, and we've said many times that if the theme of Worm is trauma, then the theme of this book is recovery, and it makes absolute sense that as we, you know, I don't know if we're approaching the climax of the story, but this feels pretty climactic. I mean, this feels more climactic than anything we've faced up to this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think comparatively, like the Worm's Cauldron raid was like just a couple arcs before the end of Worm,
yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's happening here, but I think, you know, structurally it could slot into the same place.
It could, yeah. I mean, it feels very well like that could be what's happening, although it could go in some other direction,
Sure,
of course.
sure, of course.
And yeah, so the idea that we're putting these different characters who've had different experiences in what is in some ways a similar situation, and what is in other ways almost an inverse of that situation. And then, like you said, giving them a chance to maybe make a different choice. I think that'll be really cool if that's the way it goes. I'm not certain that it's going to be exactly that, but it's definitely going to be. I mean, I feel pretty confident actually that what we're seeing is some kind of opportunity to see a different spin or a different take or a different angle on the same set of ideas.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think
cool.
that's thematically wonderful. I mean, it's narratively pleasing. I think it's inherently fascinating to me that, like, yeah, I mean, I think one of the things about Ward is that I have enjoyed throughout most of it is this idea that it is very much its own thing, right? It is the sequel to this book. It has a lot of the same characters. It's dealing with a lot of the same things, but it feels distinct. But yeah, it is also a sequel, right? And so I think touching on the previous book in a really real, specifically thematic way, I think is something that the book should do sooner or later, and it feels like that's really what we're starting to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's even this idea that Cauldron was this trauma that was perpetrated upon the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that story ended without really resolving that, right? And so now we have to return to that, and we have to reevaluate that, and we have to grapple with that. There was no way we were going to get out of Parahumans without having our characters truly grapple with this and everything that it represents. And maybe I'm being too specific when I say Cauldron, but there's something. I think there's something that's being symbolized by the fact that this is happening in the Cauldron headquarters, right? Because Wildbow didn't have to make it the Cauldron headquarters. He could have said, there's some other tinker who made like a super vast complex somewhere. Yeah. And teacher took that over, and it's super cool and new, and you've never seen it before. And I mean, Wildbow loves his settings, right? He could have made a completely new setting, but he chose to set it in the Cauldron headquarters.
Yeah, he chose to set it in the Cauldron headquarters. He chose to make the Custodian still here. He chose to make Contessa still here. You know, I mean, like, Contessa could have been somewhere else too. Contessa didn't need to be in prison here, and brought out and brought into things here at the culmination of this part of the story. But she is, and so we're doing this. Yeah, and I think we can't underplay the importance of those choices on the story.
Yeah. Well said. So, getting back into the story.
Yeah, we went off on quite a tangent there.
Yep. So they find that Furcate is hanging out with Rain and Tristan. Victoria notices that Furcate's costume is different, and that her Victoria's fashion diagnosis is highly positive.
Yeah, she likes that costume.
Glowing. So they conjecture that part of the rationale for how the teams were dispersed was to avoid people running into flock members who they knew. But of course, this was disrupted by teacher.
Yeah, but it also, I mean, it's very clearly just like strategic, right? I think they have this whole thing where they kind of guess who's where based on what similar type of capes were sent in on the second wave than the first, right? Because you don't want people that you know, or people from your groups that like, oh, look, there's the dead body of my friend that I'm walking by as I smart. I really like this stuff with Furcate though, because once again, I think we're doing this like very kind of inherently fascinating, almost backgrounded character progression on her, because the whole time we've been in Victoria's, not the whole time, but the last few times we've been in Victoria's head, and Victoria does not really understand who Furcate is. And the things that she's been going through, how her power works. She doesn't get any of this, but we do. So like she notes this and comments on it in her ignorant kind of way where she doesn't fully understand it, but we can fill in the blanks. We know that the reason why this person's costume is different is this is like a different version of Furcate, and presumably one that more closely aligned with her priority system.
Yeah, right. Which has all kinds of themes bouncing around in there.
Sure. And, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's funny that Furcate is the character who we already know kind of dies repeatedly all the time. So her dying and coming back to life is just an interesting added layer to that.
Yeah, I love this moment when Victoria says like either she's, paying close attention to her aesthetic to change costumes constantly, or her power is doing it, and that is interesting, and it's italicized, and it's just like she's such a nerd sometimes, right?
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I really want to understand the ability of this shard to understand what a cool costume is.
Yeah.
That's funny.
The other thing that I think we get confirmed here, just like a little bit of continuity, is that I think Tristan or Byron, I can't remember which, sorry guys, does call Furcate she here. And one of the things that I know was wondered about before was that had Furcate moved far enough along in her transition to be comfortable with that pronoun, we had Victoria call her she, but Victoria again doesn't know the situation. So seeing someone that understands the situation call her by that pronoun kind of very, very much signals that, yeah, that's how far along she is, and it's like it's great. We could assume by the numbers, but it's like we're getting kind of explicit confirmation within the book.
Yeah, that is cool. I didn't even notice that for being what it was, but yeah, that's a confirmation right there.
Yeah,
I agree. So as Rain works on a covering for Victoria's injured hand, he mentions that Love Lost and Colt have a whole bunch of Tinker tokens today. Which may partly explain why Love Lost has been even more heartless than usual.
Yeah, this is crazy, man.
Yeah.
So just to lay out what happened here, they needed to go talk to Cradle about something. I don't know, like what? What did they need to talk to Cradle about? They weren't going to ask him if he wanted to come, were they?
I'm kind of spacing. I thought it was that they were going to send him into Dimension X, and they wanted to take away his powers as much as possible when they made the transition. And so that's why they did it.
Yeah. So they needed him to give his coins up.
Yeah.
Right. And he wouldn't give them to Rain. He would only agree to give them to Love Lost because he hates Rain that much. So she takes them. So she's got the sociopathy or psychopathy coins, right?
Right.
And is just kind of hanging around here, like fully just chilling. And you're like, oh my God. Like, I think Victoria even says like, oh God, I didn't realize how precarious this whole situation was. And you're like, yeah. But I love that the book kind of steps back and like makes you realize, I think Rain is the one who posits this, that like, actually this is making it less likely for her to just horribly brutalize me, because instead of feeling like super angry and furious at me, she just feels like nothing. And that's actually like, it's actually helping the situation. And I think that's really fascinating, because I agree with that. Once that was laid out to me, I was like, oh yeah, that's a good point. This probably is better than the alternative.
Yeah. It's also interesting how Rain is, in my opinion, a little bit too sanguine about the idea that she could actually just kill him.
Yeah,
like he's like, I mean, she could kill me.
Right.
I don't think she will.
I think that's fascinating, because I think it shows like a common trait that like the stakes of this battle is having an effect on the way these guys are dealing with, the consequences of the people they're working with and what they could do. I mean, Victoria's like, yeah, the worst I could do is like hurt one of my teammates, and he's like, yeah, I mean, she could just kill me.
Yeah. They're normalizing things that in the past would have been line crossing for them. Sure. I think that's totally true.
Yeah. And I love like this whole dynamic between the three of them, I think is really wonderful, because like you have Love Lost, who still hates Rain, does not probably want to kill him, but still doesn't like him. Still probably pretty torn about how she feels about him. There's a lot of anger mixed in there, kind of a dull and muted anger right now, thanks to those coins. And then you have Colt, who's just kind of like, she very much seems like the I'm just happy to be here person in these moments, right? Like where she's just like I think she says no duh to someone's like comment later, and like there's this moment here where Rain is using his power to kind of shave off bits of the armor covering he's making Victoria, but it's a creative use of his power, but it's like pretty clunky because it's not like the cuts aren't like perfect, they're messy, and she just comes over there and uses her superior blade power to just do it better. than he's doing it. She just like gets frustrated seeing him and just grabs it and just does better. I just like this kind of the complexity of the interaction between the mall cluster is really fascinating to me, and I want to see more of them. I really do.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think I think Victoria describes her as being out of it. Like,
Yeah.
The way she behaves, it kind of reminds me of like when you're on like laughing gas or something and like nothing matters.
Sure.
She just kind of, her whole attitude, like she's in an objectively terribly dangerous situation and she just seems to be completely blasé, and it definitely seems to be powers related.
Yeah, but this leads to kind of this moment that we have between Lovelast and Victoria here, where Colt says that she wants like part of Lovelast's agreement in this whole thing, in both taking the coin, being willing to take the coins, and being willing to come out here and help out, was that she gets a day off every year so she can visit her daughter, who is deceased, right?
Right.
So this is literally just, I want to go to my daughter's grave type thing. And Rain is immediately like, I wasn't going to bring that up, which is, again, a wonderful little insight into the dynamic between these two characters, because, like, Colt just doesn't have tact. Like, she just doesn't. But we have this moment where Victoria, like, understands it and says, I did something similar. I used to go back home where my family was, pay a visit, leave flowers or pictures I seen. Matters. And they have this moment here where, like, I mean, they're not like BFFs now, but they like this moment of understanding. And I thought this was fascinating. And I kind of went down a rabbit hole, and special thanks to Kayakin, who helped me out finding different pieces of this, because they are like the world's best worm passage searcher in the world. But just like these moments throughout their relationship that are pretty complex, and pretty more complex than I think a lot of the other Victoria and villain relationships in the story, right? Because there's always been, I think, a little bit of empathy here from Victoria, right? Like, you go back to the moment where she finds all the pictures that Lovelast has kept of her daughter on the computer, and despite destroying the evidence and messing everything up, the one thing Victoria does is leave a note that says, we're not going to hold these hostage. You're going to get these back. Don't worry. I'm not going to use these as a bargaining chip or anything. There's care there. And I mean, there's all kinds of instances where she's angry with her. She's mad at her. She doesn't particularly like her. And I'm not saying like Victoria likes Lovelast or anything, but I think there's something to the effect of like this law enforcement officer who is kind of a shitty mom, who lost her kid and lost her way a little bit, that Victoria relates to. Like, is Lovelast kind of a Carol, sort of, maybe a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you said that, I thought that was definitely in there somewhere. At first, I was thinking, oh yeah, Victoria sees a lot of parallels between herself and Lovelast, and feels empathy with her, but then the realization that like she lost her daughter and she's definitely older, that it makes a lot more sense to me, that she's seeing in Lovelast a kind of fallen Carol or something. It's interesting because I think there's both Carol and Victoria elements.
I agree with that.
There's like what Victoria is afraid is true about herself.
Sure.
But I mean, it's interesting to me because you're exactly right that she has almost too much empathy for this vicious person. Like she's way harder on Etna than she is on Lovelast.
Sure.
And Etna is definitely someone who she sees unflattering similarities with, maybe subconsciously. So that may be more evidence that it's actually more that she sees her mom in Carol rather than herself.
Yeah, and of course, back I think when we first learned what happened with Lovelast, Rain is relaying this information to Breakthrough, and Sveta specifically says, "I'm tired of shitty parents like Kenzie's, like Victoria's." So that line has been drawn here for us. And I think I like it because I think it kind of demonstrates to me that, you know, I think there might be some people listening to right now and going, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Victoria hates Carol. And my response to that would be, no, she doesn't. I mean, she doesn't like, she has her mom can be a real jerk sometimes, and she frustrates her and she angers her, and there are moments when she hates her. But I think her relationship with her mom is more complicated than that. Her relationship with her mom, like, she wants to impress her mom sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
she wants her mom to love her, and she wants to feel that love. And that's a complex thing. And I think it's not crazy to think that someone that, you know, subconsciously even reminds Victoria of her mother would have a complex she would have a complex reaction to that person, moments of empathy, moments of extreme frustration, moments of anger. I think there was one moment when she learned that Love Lost helped Cradle with the machine that cut everyone up, and she said, well, fuck her then, right? Like
Yeah.
it's I think this all tracks really, really well, and I like it a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nothing more to add. I think that's exactly what's going on in that dynamic.
Man, we just keep going on tangents.
It's good. Yeah. I mean, I think there's some deep veins to be mined in this story. So
Yeah.
So Victoria gently ditches the major malfunctions as well as a big chunk of others. I mean, more seriously, the other group goes in the direction that Saint fled, while Victoria's group goes deeper into the facility.
Yeah, and I really like this because, like, we get the framing device here that they're like, a smaller group needs to go forward here. We can't take all these people with us. So we got to get smaller. So we've got to tell some people go the other direction. And Victoria makes the decision here to basically tell Fume Hood and the malfunctions, you guys can't come with us. You guys got to go with these other people. And I find this pretty interesting because the last two chapters, and I think we're reminded of it here specifically in this moment, she feels a responsibility for these people. She feels like they are here because I got them into this. I was one of the ones that talked Fume Hood into giving the hero thing another shot after everything that went down. I was the one that really pushed for the malfunctions to step into the big leagues in the way that they have, and now they're here. And in this moment, she kind of says, like as much as she feels that personal responsibility, as much as she feels like it's her duty, it's her role to watch over them, she's kind of recognizing that she's gotta let those birds leave the nest and gotta trust that they're gonna be okay without her, or that she needs to realize that their outcome in this battle is not her responsibility anymore.
Yeah, I think there might have also been an element to, like, she thinks that maybe the direction her team is going is the more dangerous direction, and she wants them to go in the less dangerous direction. I don't know if that was in there or not.
I don't think that's explicitly in there, but it seems like it's the opposite to me. I mean, like, they know they're specifically going towards the center of the danger, whereas I think Victoria's not even sure where they're going yet.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't sure if Victoria wasn't sure, or if Victoria knew basically where they were going, but was not actively thinking about it in order to hide it from us via dramatic irony.
Yeah, I don't know. I hope not the latter, because I don't like that.
You're not a fan of that, I know.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, do you think? I mean, like, because part of my reasoning for this, or when I'm thinking about this, is, I mean, yes, the surface level, hey, we just need less people, so someone's got to go the other way. It might as well you guys. Like, I'd rather be with my team. Sorry, like, we work better together. But also, like, it's like, do you think, like, maybe Victoria doesn't feel like she can be the person that watches out for them anymore? Like, maybe the choices that she's made, the things that she's done, they're better off not under her eye at this moment. Like, that's a reflection of how she's feeling about herself. I don't know if there's a lot of textual support for that, but that's just an interesting thought that occurred to me.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I can't think of any particular, like, direct support that's the motivation for this, but we do know that her headspace right now is one of, you know, self-doubt and pretty low feelings about herself in general.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, I think last week we talked about the idea that she felt, this was also us kind of reading between the lines with this idea that maybe she felt like a hypocrite in front of them, like giving all this highfalutin heroic advice to them while, like, her foot is covered in gore from someone who she just executed.
Yeah, maybe she just feels unworthy of being that person now. Yeah.
It's an interesting read. I think, you know, sure, I'll say it's valid. It is, you don't need to prove it.
Yeah, in the end, I don't think it matters too much. It's just kind of, I'm just trying to get into Victoria's headspace a little bit
Sure.
here,
Yeah. So Lookout disarms all the bombs in the area, of which there were many apparently, because Lookout, she can do that.
Yep.
As they move into the control room, Lookout's mask takes over more and more monitors. And then she begins to pipe in the video feed of teachers' defenses, as well as some of the groups of heroes who are being pinned down or who are already defeated. This includes Chevalier and Narwhal, who are down. Valkyrie is injured or incapacitated in some way, and Legend is pinned down. It's not looking good.
No, yeah, I think this is a really powerful moment. Teachers group, like we get this big contrast, right? We have all of our heroes, some of the most powerful people we know, hurt, being carted off by their flock, or just completely pinned down. And then we have teachers group kind of standing there casually. Just they seem totally relaxed. They seem totally cool. Teachers just like casually like shaking hands with more and more people, like creating thralls every moment. The only one that is any kind of upset is Saint, and good, fuck that guy. But I mean, like this is kind of our all is lost moment, right? Like conceptually, our worst heroes are out. Look how many of the bad guys there are. There's so many of them. There's so many capes here, and most of the most powerful ones are on the bad guy side. And now we're in this situation where suddenly our heroes fully understand this is it, that what they're doing. Like this thing that Imp has said will guarantee them a victory, 100% chance, Imp says, is now the best chance for victory they have, right? Like the book has clearly shown they've lost almost. Like the main force seems to have either lost or been completely stalled in a way that any kind of reinforcements probably not going to get them over the hump. And suddenly everything rests on Breakthrough and company.
Yeah. Right. And we don't see at this moment how they're going to get through that. Like there's no, you can make rocks appear and right. But pretty soon we're going to see the hope.
But I think that framing is really important though, because I think in order to understand the severity of the situation in which Contessa, leaps into in the next chapter, we have to understand that, like, they're fucked. Right? Like I think I think that's really important framing for everything that happens in the next chapter.
Sure. I actually think that a lot of minor things in this story throughout the whole story will reveal themselves to have been framing to set up this idea that pulling a Contessa out of a hat is like a narratively necessary and appropriate thing that needs to happen here.
Yeah.
I mean, what I think Wildbow very, very intentionally and intelligently like shuffled Contessa off the board during Gold Morning. Like she was just like out of the picture and until the end basically, and then it was all over by then. And now she's very intentionally being brought back into the picture, like in a well set up Chekhov's gun fashion. So it's just interesting to track all of the decisions surrounding that choice, which I think have been sort of made in the background throughout this whole story.
I think you're probably right. Yeah, I like that.
So Kinsey reports the teacher wants to talk to her. Victoria tries to persuade her not to under any circumstances. Do not do that.
Yeah, and because Kenzie always listens, right? There's a 0% chance that she ignores Victoria right here, right? Especially since Kenzie is extremely emotionally fragile, and teacher will probably like placate her with compliments on how great she is and how important she could be and how powerful she could be as part of his group and oh, how amazing and stuff like that. That's not going to have any effect on Kenzie at all.
Yeah, no, and Victoria and Kenzie, who thinks that like communication should be open and free all the time and there shouldn't be any secrets.
Yeah, plus the line about like but wouldn't distracting him help? Like she's so concerned with helping. It's just like it's there, like there is no doubt in my mind that Kenzie completely ignored this advice and just talked to teacher. Because I mean look at how she even says it here. Look at how like kind of like depressingly I don't even know the right word, but like her message appeared again in a spot that was hard to read. Then as I watched, the letters shifted, moving down, 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 until they were superimposed against the space beneath my eyes' field of view, written as if I could see through my cheekbone to see yellow letters against pink-black background. Okay.
Yeah. That's so cool, right?
Yeah.
Like, I agree. It's the first time, for one thing, I've ever seen someone describe letters superimposed on vision dropping below your actual skin so that you're like seeing them through your flesh. Like it's such a weird image, but like I bet everyone who's reading like immediately kind of like stopped reading and then like looked down to see if they could replicate that effect in their imagination. Yeah. I sure did.
It's just like it goes so far out of the way to make it difficult to see, right? Like it's just like it's almost kind of nuts in that it's like so, and it's like, oh God, like that's how she acquiesces there. It's just be like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, right. It's like a visual representation of a droopy Eeyore voice.
Right. Right.
I love it.
Yeah. And like, I think this combined with this idea that like, you know, throughout this chapter, we've been noting that Kenzie is suddenly kind of like winning against Teacher in the hacking war that's going on between them. Like, I think it's Ashley who specifically says, you know, Kenzie's not normally successful against Teacher when he's throwing all his resources against her. And so like the belief there is, oh, maybe this has disrupted him enough to where he's just not at full force. And so she can battle her way through his defenses. But like the pessimistic read is like, maybe he's just like letting her because like, first of all, he's pretty confident that he's going to win. Like getting into his systems to be able to switch to cameras to show how the state of the battle is going does not make the heroes confident. Like, and maybe it's part of reaching out to Kenzie and it's part of this like, I mean, we've had this kind of like open thing where Teacher was specifically targeting Kenzie as someone that he needs to deal with. Right. And I don't know, this is just terrifying to me.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of things that have been set up forever, like how long ago was that? When,
so long ago.
Yeah. I agree. Something is going to happen here in the background. This is building towards something.
Yeah.
So Chastity points out that one of the capes with Valkyrie is what might be of interest to Imp, and we have no idea who this could be.
Yeah, nobody important, surely.
Yeah.
Imp plays this off about as coolly as is humanly possible, but Victoria still absolutely picks up on her dishonesty here, right? Yeah. And part of what I was trying to do on my rereads of this chapter is really kind of like stack up reasons why all of our characters' decision-making ability might be impaired going into this next chapter, right? And I think, like, do you think that Imp seeing her brother alive in this moment is going to kind of fuck with her reasoning ability a bit here?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I totally.
Like I just got my brother back, and now you're telling me that an Undersider is going to die. I wonder if that could mean,
right, yeah.
Like, is he an Undersider still? Right.
Or maybe not even him is like, I got one person back, but you're going to take another away from me. Like, I mean,
exactly.
Like I totally agree that so many of these moments are like, look how not in a position these people are to be making calls like this.
Right.
But we're gonna put the fate of the world onto their shoulders.
I don't remember if we marked it out or not, but the idea that Ashley has accidentally killed someone is just the worst thing that could happen before putting this kind of decision in front of her.
Kenzie has just learned that her new team doesn't really care for her, or might want to ditch her. Victoria is Victoria. Tristan is a fucking mess right now, and I'm sure that affects Byron. Rain is doing okay, but like
Rain's dealing.
Yeah, that's lately been our thing, right? As we go through the breakthrough, we always get to Rain, and we're like, he's doing okay.
I think the fact that Love, Lost, and Colt are here can't be super positive for his mental state right now.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Plus, he just had to like make a call about murdering someone last chapter, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Like he seems okay, but I'm sure that wasn't an easy decision for him either.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of it's been very rare that he doesn't seem okay. It's usually coincided with like him getting Love Lost's teeth or whatever. Like weird stuff like that.
Sure.
Or being in the most stressful period of his life during his arc.
Sure.
So anyway, so they reach a critical hallway and they are abruptly attacked by the overseer. She tries to use the environment against them in clever ways, in addition to, of course, hitting really hard, moving quickly, and being impossible to harm. They survive the fight, buying Imp time to retrieve the person that the overseer was guarding. Contessa.
So that was the thing. Like, I miss all this like stuff when I don't read the chapters till the end of the week.
It was a minor thing. I think maybe a few people thought it seriously, and then I think it became meme status where it's like, that description could technically describe Taylor.
I guess.
Even though we know for a fact that Contessa is here and looks like that.
Yeah, I kind of like, I mean, to me, and I maybe not everyone did this, but to me, like the second custodian showed up, I'm like, oh, they're probably going for Contessa.
Right.
Like
also Taylor's missing an arm, folks.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway.
No, it healed. That's what happens on Earth Aleph. Arms heal.
Good. Okay.
All right, let's go.
It's 15.7. The chapter immediately confirms who it is. It's Contessa. She defends an onslaught by the custodian while still stiff from her pseudo coma, using a combination of precise movements and commands intended to provoke exactly the right response in the other capes.
Yeah, I think this is a really great opening to a chapter, and I think it's really important to what this chapter is working to set up, because like we've had throughout this entire arc, we've had defeats, we've had wins that just feel like defeats, and everything, and it's just gotten worse. And then Contessa busts in and just flexes her path to victory muscles, and it's so wonderfully satisfying, right? It's just like she knows she's ordering people around with confidence. Everything's going right. Like just Rain fucking flubs the tool throwing, but it doesn't matter because her path to victory.
Yeah,
her path to victory is so powerful. It can counteract Rain.
Her path to victory counted on him flubbing it. That was the whole point.
Exactly.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. So yeah, it is this moment of like almost kind of bliss where you're just like excited because you're like, if this girl's on their side, we got a shot. We got a shot now. Yeah. Like this is it. And I think Imp plays a wonderful role in this that we'll get to in a bit.
Yeah. Let's hold off on that. Yeah. So like you said, everything's great. You know, we got Custodian who's been set up as being really strong, but Contessa is able to fight her off and then beat her by telling her that teacher is going to ask her to tear down her masterpiece, which is this building, and that she's going to come to hate him and herself, and this drives her away.
Yeah, and this is one of those moments that I think like if there was no Custodian interlude, this would have been a good moment. Yeah, it would have worked, but that's not enough for this book, right? It's not enough that it works. We got to see Custodian's interlude. We got to experience and we got to learn about this person. So this moment is so much more impactful because when Contessa says these things, it isn't just a reveal about a character. It lines up to everything we understood the character to be. And there's a satisfaction in that as a reader when your understanding of a character, your read of a character is supported by another character within your story. It's satisfying. And you're like, yes, I understand. I get it. I get her. I get why this would work on her. I totally get it. And that's, again, we said this a million times, but that is what the interludes do in the story, and that is why the interludes are fantastic.
Right. And I think it's cool because, Contessa's back. We see a fun Contessa combat scene where things work out improbably well for her, but then she doesn't win through combat. She wins through basically, the 4 words type of victory where she just says the thing that will win. Like she doesn't even necessarily know anything about Custodian. This is her power puppeting. These are the words you say to get her to leave, which has implications, right? Because pretty much the whole rest of this chapter depends on how we interpret Contessa's motives.
Yep.
which which I think people have been talking about for like a week now. So I don't know how we're going to fit all of that into the rest of this podcast, but we'll try to touch on some things.
Poorly.
Yeah. So it's pretty important to have Imp here, right? Like the scene would work without her, but it really helps to have Imp, who's already familiar with her power, participate in the elucidation of the path to victory. And even throwing in some fun conflict as Imp is increasingly disappointed, much as we are, the reader, that Contessa can't just provide an instant win. In fact, to hear Contessa tell it, it's like too late for her to do almost anything meaningful. She says, I can't defeat him. Spare as many of your allies' lives as possible and save the lives of the people in the city. Not as I or my power understand circumstances, and my power understands everything outside of, et cetera, blind spots.
Yeah.
And that's Wildbow telling us, and Contessa telling the teachers, the what did I say?
The readers?
the characters.
The teachers.
I was reading the word teacher.
You've been teacher whammied.
I've been whammied, yeah. That hey, this isn't going to be an instant win card here.
Yeah,
we're about to, prepare to be disappointed, everyone. It's parahumans time.
Yep. And Imp is, you're absolutely right that Imp is key to all this working, I think. Not only is she here to fill Victoria in on the exposition of how Contessa works, but she is the audience surrogate in these moments, right? She, like we do, knows what Contessa to do. And she, like we do, knows what Contessa means for the fight. And at the start of this chapter, as we said, we're really excited. We're just as excited as Impin. We're like, yes, this is it. This is the moment. The I win button is here. And then the reality of the situation happens. Contessa lays it out for us, and it turns our simple guaranteed I win button into a button that has a whole lot of blood on it. And once again, our disappointment is echoed in Imp, just like our excitement was. Her frustration, her anger, that's us. That's how we feel. And that's when you kind of realize that this is, we never should have felt this way. We never should have been this excited. We never should have felt that this was going to be the simple solution, because that's never what Contessa has been. Contessa has never been the clear, simple, like innocent, no blood on your hands solution to the problem. It's always been a path to see things that is filled with trade-offs, horrible that's literally what she says later in the chapter. Is like, when you start with the end result, everything in between is tough decisions and trade-offs and horrible choices. That's just the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a almost shocking way of viewing the way her power works. And I mean, we sort of had some insight into this because we did have an interlude with her. We've understood her role in the story, but yeah, it explains very clearly how like her life is not this cakewalk, because she can't get any outcome. She can just definitely get an outcome that is achievable. But that doesn't mean all outcomes are achievable.
Yeah.
And then of course there's the factor of blind spots, which I think, which is going to,
which are fascinating because she is underplaying them in a way that I find really interesting. And and I think you're right that part of what we're doing here, and especially helps that we're in Victoria's head, a person who just knows her as the boogeyman and not anything else before this moment. We're trying to suss out her motives here, because we don't really know what her goal is, what she wants. Like, I'm sure there's a real desire to take her at face value and everything she's saying, but we don't know. Like, what do you want? What are you trying to do? What is your goal? Like, what private questions are you asking your power that you're not letting the rest of the group in on, right?
Right.
And I think that's a really fun wrinkle to this whole thing. I think Contessa, plays herself off as a person that's being 100% straightforward, is laying out the choices for you in the best possible light, with the way that makes it the most possible for things to go that way. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, she also admits to, like, she admits that she could convince them to do whatever she wanted.
Right.
So, like, on the one hand, she's trying not to be manipulative, but also she's admitting to them that she could completely manipulate them. And
well, her power is inherently manipulative. Like, it can't not be. It's like,
right.
I don't know. I don't know how you don't manipulate someone when you can see the path to an outcome you want. Like,
yeah. I mean, one of my favorite things about I love a lot of her lines in this chapter, but I think one of my favorite is when Sveta goes, "How do you know all this if you were in a coma? The Simurgh, who's where, what custodian is doing?" And then she replies, "I'm finding it out as I explain it to you. I ask my power for the path to provide the explanation I need to give that serves the purpose of filling me in on present circumstances. When you talk amongst yourselves, I'm asking my usual questions." So everything she's saying to them, every word coming out of her mouth is shard puppeteer work.
Yeah.
Which is even more like uncomfortable in the context of like, wait a minute, we don't really trust the shards at this point.
Will you say at this point as if there was a point in which we did?
Before we knew what they were, I guess. I mean, we just thought they were, cool, superpowers. But like setting aside the fact that she could just be like actually secretly working for Teacher, because we can't even be sure that that's not the case.
Yeah.
She's, I don't know, Victoria. I think the point is, setting aside what we know, the readers, Victoria has like no reason to trust this person.
Yeah. And I love that passage you picked out there, because I think it's like a really also a clever way of reminding the reader about the details of her power. Because like, I mean, like structurally, we, the readers of this book, have not dealt with Contessa in like
years.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're reading along live, like lots of years.
Yeah.
But so there needs to be a few beats in the story that just remind us of the details of this power, because I think it's important to understanding the difficulty of the choice to have a full, clear picture of what her power can and cannot do.
Yeah, I agree. So Scott,
let's
lay out these options that
right.
Contessa gives them.
All right.
A, many heroes will die, including Contessa. 1 Undersider and 2 Heartbroken, and 1 member of Breakthrough will suffer practically indefinitely. Casualties are mostly confined to the capes of the facility. Teacher's plan is disrupted or mitigated, whatever that means. The city does okay, although the villains rule for a period of time.
Yeah, so this is like the short-term heroics chapter, right? The noble heroes sacrifice themselves to win the day, and it's a short-term victory, but long-term bad.
Long-term bad, but then eventually the villains are taken out of control, right?
Yeah.
Option B, let Teacher initiate the plan before attacking. Hundreds of thousands of civilians die, including a handful of specific ones known to the heroes, I guess to make it feel more meaningful to them. The heroes win and retain control over the city. In the long term, objectively speaking, it provides the best, healthiest outcome, Contessa editorializes.
Not at all influencing them.
Right.
Yeah. So this is the pure utilitarian option, right?
Well, like hundreds of thousands. See, that's the thing is I was like, man, you could have communicated this differently, Contessa. How is hundreds of thousands of people dying healthier than the villains ruling? Like, are the villains going to kill hundreds of thousands of people? Like, what is they might, but you don't say that. Like when you say the villains rule, that's just a big old question mark. Like, which villains? I like, this is my big, okay, let's finish before I get into that.
Okay. Sure.
Option C, Teacher gets away. His plan is disrupted. The heroes suffer moderate losses. The city suffers moderate losses. 2 members of Breakthrough are removed from the equation. 1 endures torment for quote unquote quite some time. 0 Undersider deaths, but 1 heartbroken death.
Yeah. So this is the kind of the
See, okay.
the middle of the road option.
Yeah,
I guess
this is the middle of the road option. Okay, so I guess we talk about what we think first.
I mean, this is. I think we need to talk about this trolley problem, the framing device of it, because like let's be frank here. I have always hated trolley problems because I think they are fascinating, intellectual, studies, right? Like it is fascinating to think about this problem and to logic your way through it in a way that you try to come up with the best or what you think is the best possible outcome. They are fine abstractly. they don't work in reality, because in reality, you never really have all the data, right? Like, you never truly know if the choices are as binary as the trolley problem makes them seem, right? You never really understand that. But what Contessa is trying to do here is basically take that complaint I have away, right? To say, like, okay, well, in this case, you do have all the data, because that is what I do. I provide all the data. So she's almost the only way in which a trolley problem can be taken out of the abstract and into a real actual choice that someone has to reason with, right?
Yeah.
But I still don't think she has all the data.
I don't think she has all the data because of blind spots. And also, if you're Victoria, it's not a question of whether Contessa has all the data objectively. It's a question of whether you believe that she's telling the truth, or you don't have like 100 other reasons why you should doubt it, right? Like, if somebody comes up to you and they're like, I have 100% certainty that this trolley problem situation is happening, you're going to be like, oh, you're a crazy person. Like, you're either gonna have to show me some proof, and even proof could just be part of an elaborate hoax, right? So you can't gin up certainty out of nothing. Like, that doesn't work.
Yeah, and I mean, to give Contessa credit, I do think perhaps on some level she's trying, right? I mean, I think she's certainly more than in the past, right? She has this whole moment where she gives this speech about how I've only stopped and made choices for myself 5 times since Cauldron began. 3 of those times, the outcomes were catastrophic. 1 of them led to my being captured. The other 2 times, the outcomes were neutral. Here, with the stakes as high as they are, I won't gamble, and I won't make my own decision about what victory is. So she's saying, I've shown that I'm bad at this in the past, so I'm going to leave it up to you. I'm going to be democratic, quote unquote. But that's kind of bullshit, isn't it? Like, I just I think she's downplaying her blind spots. Like, I think the idea that, yeah, I mean, I can't see them, but like, I've simulated them enough to where, like, I'm pretty sure that I'm right, but not 100. Like, but we're like, I just like, I don't think that the trolley problem we're given here is as explicitly this is all the data, and this is the only way it can happen, and this is you truly have to choose between these 3 and only these 3 options and nothing else. I don't buy that. I reject that hypothesis, basically.
So I could go on a tangent about why I agree, and that the blind spots are probably way worse than she realizes, specifically because the situation has been like created with her in mind.
Sure.
Such that, like, teachers going to leverage those blind spots in ways where they're going to mess up her ability to model them.
Yeah.
But I don't think we even need to go that far, because I think the point is that the situation is definitely out of control. Like, I mean, it would be like, I guess I'll be surprised if Contessa actually does deliver one of these 3 options as she has stated it. It's possible. I think that Wildbow, I trust Wildbow to make it interesting either way.
Sure.
My like current suspicion is that something will come out of the woodwork. I don't know. Seamerg shows up suddenly or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's derailed, and we don't quite get any of these 3. You know, maybe it looks like one of them. I don't know, but I think that the story, I don't know. Webbo does a lot of interesting things, and he always surprises me. So I'm not going to say like it's definitely going to be this way.
And I fully admit that the point of this section might literally just be, no, what I've done here is created a situation in which all data is known, and you must choose based on this data. And in which case, that fucking sucks.
Right.
But I have a hard time fully agreeing with that.
Well, and so then that kind of opens up like the second tranche of the discussion, like, because there's sort of 2 discussions, right? Like, first discussion is like, do you trust it? Do you play the game? Second discussion is like, all right, let's assume that you have no better option than to pick one of these. Like even if you don't trust that it's true, you have no better option than to pick one. So then what do you pick? And even so, like, this is a take that I haven't actually seen much of, but it's my issue is like, you can really make these sound, you can make any one of these three options sound better than the others by just kind of like changing the wording. And that's kind of weird. So one thing I know.
Are you trying to say that Contessa like deliberately worded these in deliberate ways just to deliberately fuck with the people that she's throwing this decision on? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's possible, sure. I mean, I think what made me notice this is that I've seen a lot more people in chat and so forth and Reddit and whatever voting for the one that results in all the civilian deaths. And I'm like,
you mean B?
Option B.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's or saying that the heroes are going to pick that one. And I'm like, no way would the heroes pick this one.
I'm gonna like, we're gonna play a game in a bit. I'm gonna declare right now, I don't think a single hero picks option B. Not a single one of Breakthrough picks this option. No.
So that's what's interesting is like I see people in chat picking option B and saying the heroes are going to pick option B, and then when I read what they're saying, I'm like, oh, like you and I just have different understandings of what these options are relative to each other. Like different people read different things into like the city does okay, but the villains are going to rule. That's not her exact language, but like the idea of the villains ruling. Some people just think that's much worse than other people do.
Sure. Yeah.
People have different assumptions walking into this, and it leads to different. It's not a matter of like the objective ranking. It's a matter of your subjective reaction to how Contessa has laid out this extremely complex and multifaceted outcome in like 3 sentences.
Yeah, which is maybe why you shouldn't pawn this decision off on a group of people. Like,
yeah,
I don't want to like say Contessa's bullshit or anything, but I think the decision to say, well, every time I've chosen, I've fucked it up. So it's your, like, I'm going to tell you all this information and I'm going to detach responsibility from it. Like, I've told you how it works now. It's your choice now. Is just like you put information into the world and then say, other people, you deal with it and tell me what you want to do. And like, it's like she's taking no ownership of any of this at all. None of it. And that rubs me the wrong way.
I mean, there's also the factor that I don't even think Contessa is the one necessarily verbalizing these phrasings. Like, if she's trusting her shard to come up with even the phrasing of it, then I'm like, okay, you've abdicated even the part of this where you were going to be responsible for posing the choice to them.
Yeah,
we don't know one way or the other whether that's true, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
I mean, one of the things we know for sure about Contessa from her interlude way back in Worm is this kind of this petrification when it comes to making decisions, right? This absolute fear that this power wonderfully slotted itself into and said, well, you don't have to. Here's all the decisions for you. And when that wonderful beat, and I love that Wild Bill did this, take her power away from her temporarily and watch how she reacts, and she's almost like completely like terrified. Yeah. And almost frozen in inaction because she doesn't know what to do when she actually has to make the choice herself, because the choices, they've just been made for her. I want an ice cream cone. Well, here's how you do it. You don't have to make any choices. Here's how you do it. Yeah. Here's an ice cream cone.
Yeah.
And I think that's fascinating, and I think that's what we're playing off of here, is that the idea of making, and look, the idea of having to make this choice is terrible for anyone. Like, and I'm not saying I blame Contessa for looking for asking her power the stuff and then going, fuck,
yeah.
this is all bad. I don't want to have to be the one to do this. But then to turn to other people and go, so you do it. I don't like that either.
I will tip my hat to Wildbow for coming up with 3 options that all suck.
Yeah. They're very well contrived. Like, I really like them. Every time you think one seems better, another beat of that one falls out where you're like, oh shit. Like, I love like the last one. There's that wonderful moment where he illustrates this with Imp, again, the audience surrogate, I think, throughout this chapter, where he's like, okay, well, this happens and nobody from the Undersiders dies. And Imp goes, all right, fuck yeah, this is the one, but one heartbroken. And she's like, damn it.
Yeah.
And I think,
Right.
again, audience surrogate, like that's, as we move through each and every one of these, we think we've got a hold on it. We think it's like, we've got a clear idea on this is the one. And then, nope.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Matt, back to the topic at hand.
Let's yeah.
Pretend you had to choose. What do you pick?
See, I if I had to choose, like if it was a gun to the head situation, I would probably literally just say, and like, let's say that I was one of the people who was at risk of dying. I would probably go with, A, because it results in the least net utilitarian losses. And then this is when you say, oh, come on, Matt, you're saying you would make the brave self-sacrificing choice in a situation like this. And I would say, well, I can't actually know that, but like that's the best answer I can give sitting in my armchair.
Sure.
As for what I would actually make in that situation, I'd probably shit myself and I'd pick whichever one got me out of the situation.
I would probably just climb into Sveta's box, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. I mean, did you have an answer?
Forced to make an option, I'd probably pick C, and I don't even know why. I would go like I just like I look at A as like mass hero death, B is like mass civilian death, and C is like the baby bear's porridge, where it's just it's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's just, and like that to me is like maybe the cop-out answer. I don't know.
Well, that's one of the ones that makes me notice how much the word choice affects things when she says like moderate losses. Like moderate is literally a weasel word that means nothing. what is moderate losses to, like, okay, you said hundreds of thousands in the one case, and then you said moderate. Is moderate
she does
200?
She does define civilian losses as 4,000, I believe. I don't think she goes into detail about the hero's losses.
I didn't write that down.
Yeah, it's 4,000.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, okay. Well, good for her then. That was going to be one of my complaints, but yeah, I guess that's a little bit more concrete.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, shall we pick for all the heroes? But my picks are pretty easy. I don't know about yours.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I'm right, but like, I kind of think that all of our heroes are going to pick A, except for Kinsey and Ashley, who are going to be much more reluctant to put each other at risk.
I think this is funny because I think our picks for what we think they're going to pick reflect what we picked.
Yeah. There's also the fact that like, I don't think I am at all factoring into my thinking here the fact that they have, like, we just talked about how they've been through hell and just been ground down for chapters and arcs, like a couple arcs now. So like and I don't have the energy to like reevaluate all my choices, but like this isn't stalwart Victoria. This is post re-traumatization by Amy Victoria. So like, yeah. I don't know.
So do you have do you have like a specific breakdown or?
No, I'm still going to go with
Ashley, Kinsey.
I think Ashley and Kinsey are going to vote probably C.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think let me say the ones I'm most confident about. First of all, I want to say, like, we're going to talk about Sveta for a while in a bit, but I'm going to say Sveta does not participate. That's my answer for that. I don't think she's going to say one or the other. I think Byron definitely chooses C. I think it's the middle. It's the middle of the road choice. And sorry, Byron, I think that's where you're going to go with. I think Victoria chooses C as well. I think Rain chooses A because Rain's our self-sacrifice buddy. I think you're right about Ashley. I think she chooses C because she's not willing to roll the dice on A. Wait, is that what you said? I can't remember now.
Yeah, I think that she doesn't want to put
Okay, I'm gonna write this down as I'm going.
the people. I think Ashley. I guess my idea is that Ashley cares more about the people in her immediate circle of concern than about random civilians.
Yeah. So Ashley chooses C. I think Kenzie's because Kenzie's choice is weird to me because on the one hand, like, I think maybe she wouldn't have been as worried about the heartbroken. Maybe she's mad at them. Like, so wait, do you think the chicken nuggets count as heartbroken in this?
Oh, I don't know.
And do you think Aiden counts as an undersider in this?
I think that as far as Kinsey is concerned, they very well might, and that's probably enough for her.
Okay. I mean, I think C has the most amount of breakthrough shit happening to it. So I feel like Kenzie's not going to want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Kenzie's going to go A or B. This is terrible audio. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that Kinsey chooses B, and hundreds of thousands of civilians dying is like that was actually my first thought about Kinsey, and then I kind of like. Actually, I'm going to revise and say that Kinsey chooses B.
Yeah, I'm going to say that too. Yeah, I like
because
that.
It's more interesting.
So we've got Victoria choosing C, Rain choosing A, Byron choosing C, Kenzie choosing B, Ashley choosing C, Sveta not participating. Our only open one is Tristan. Is Tristan out right now? Let's just. It doesn't matter. Let's guess for him. He's a different person than Byron. He deserves a different guess.
Yes.
And I don't see him siding with Byron here. I think Tristan's going to choose A.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
So interestingly, the only places where we actually disagreed is that you think Victoria chooses C, whereas I thought A. You think Byron chooses C, whereas I thought A. I kind of buy your arguments in both cases. I can see them going either way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we actually basically agree on Kinsey and Ashley. So
okay, cool.
All right.
Well, we did it, guys, and I'm sure we're 100%. The funny thing about this is the chapter's out, and so like everyone that's listening to this right now knows if we're wrong or not, and they're probably just laughing at us.
Yeah,
and that's fine.
That's fine. That's like literally the point, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like as you were saying, Sveta is consistently skeptical, and she's going so far as to accuse Contessa of being part of teachers' games, meant to just distract them with by throwing these trolley problems at her. And Contessa's like, yeah, maybe, but get in this box over here, and Sveta does that.
Yeah, and like remember we were talking about like how we're kind of teleporting back to worm time. Now Sveta is here in a small encased thing again, right? It was the ball back in worm, and now she's encased in this little box, and we've kind of just effectively wormed our way back to worm.
Yeah, right. I think it was it the Sveta going in the box thing that made you kind of first ask that question, and then we put together that list of other things.
That was it.
Yeah.
And I want to spend some time on this because I think Sveta, Sveta's reaction to this thing was the thing that caused me to go back and forth the most in this chapter, because there were moments where I was like, absolutely, fuck yes, Sveta, you're totally right. This is bullshit. This is ridiculous. This sucks. I'm furious at Contessa. We shouldn't even participate in this thing. It's ridiculous. And then there are times when I'm like, well, Sveta, I mean, this is how her power works. Like, what are we going to do here? Are we just going to not do anything? I kind of left it up to real-time decision making to see where I was going to eventually land on this thing. And I think after our entire conversation, after everything we've been through, I'm kind of on Sveta's side here. I'm kind of on Sveta's side that what Contessa has done here is kind of bullshit. Like, here's the thing. I don't think human beings are actually like designed or created or evolved to be able to make decisions like this. Like, I just think that's not how the decision-making process in a human being actually works. in real time, right? Like just like not that's not how it works. And so like to throw this to a bunch of people and just be like, hey,
yeah. I mean, my joke answer, which is actually my serious answer if it was actually Contessa, would be like, hey Contessa, ask your power which option I would pick given arbitrarily long to think about it and access to like resources to organize my thoughts and ask people for advice.
Yeah.
And then tell me what that answer is, and then that's my answer.
Sure.
Because I'm not going to do a better job than that running around scared for my life right now. And yes, in some like computationalist sense, I am responsible for that answer, whatever it is, but at least I'll know that I put thought into it that way, you know?
Yeah. And like from a thematic and story and narrative driven kind of way, the idea that Ward is going to come fully around to this opinion that actually the way Cauldron did things turns out it's just the right way to do it. Like I don't actually see the book doing that, right?
I mean, that would be an interesting twist.
Right? Like I just like, and that's not to say that Sveta is being entirely fair here. I think Sveta is charged with emotion because she's standing in front of one of the people who is primarily responsible for what happened to her. And so she's very emotional. She's very upset. But as we said earlier, she is the living embodiment of what these consequences are. Like it's one thing to talk about numbers in these abstract ways, or to talk about the people that die in these abstract ways. We're glossing over the suffering that's going to happen here, and not just to the people that die, but the people that are left behind, but to the people that suffer indefinitely. A person under option A is going to suffer indefinitely. A person under option C is going to suffer for an unspecified length of time that is not forever, but definitely not like hey, just like a couple hours, just like they're going to go in timeout for a couple hours,
Like, it's a fascinating thing for the story to do, to take Sveta of all people and put her in the situation of like, good news, you've been drafted into basically Cauldron now, and you don't get the option to abstain, basically,
right?
Because we're in this situation, and the only way out of the situation is using the super powerful precog. So.
Yeah, and the idea that she's just going to be like, yeah, if you don't answer, then it's your fault now, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I love, like, part of this is that I love Sveta, and I think I realized when, racking my brain around this thing that my mindset aligns with Sveta more than any other character in this story. And I love her. And I recognize that there are places when she's being unfair. Like, there's a moment where she says, can't we just hope that everything's going to be okay? Can't we just hold on to the hope that everything's going to be okay? And I think that is a wonderful, powerful, sentimental, heroic thing, right? To hold on to hope even at the end. That is something that Tolkien wrote about so much in Lord of the Rings, right? Like that hope is this idea that Tolkien loved, and that like hope is not, to him, hope is fighting even though you've already lost. Right? Like that's what the characters do. It's like even though they've definitely 100% for sure lost, they're going to keep fighting anyway. And it is in that moment that they win. Right. And
I mean, yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful, powerful thing. However, it's not an action. It's not taking action. It's not doing anything. And what I would like to see Sveta do here is not just remove herself from the equation, not just say this is bullshit and grumble and crawl into a box, but to actively like take agency and fight for what she believes is right here. To say, hey, like to keep this up, to not just like resign herself to this choice and say like, oh no, if we hope everything will be okay. No, like fight for what you believe in, fight for what you think is the right way to do this. If you think this is wrong, if you think this is bullshit, if you think this is fucked up, do something about it. And I think that's the Sveta that I want to see, because I think that's a clear indication of me that Sveta is different from the person she was that stepped back and didn't say anything and let what happened with the irregulars happen, right? The Sveta that says, can't we just hope everything's going to work out, is the Sveta that lets the irregulars break into Cauldron and murder people. I would hope that Sveta has moved beyond that point, and that's the person I want to see. And so while I am on her side here, I wish she was a little bit more active in this moment than just kind of resigning herself against this. And I think it's probably because like she's desperately looking for support on this, and nobody's giving it to her. Even Victoria is like, well, yeah, I mean, that'd be great, but what if this is just the way it is? Meh?
Yeah. I mean, you make a great point about how this relates to her general arc, and just the fact that we narratively speaking, are expecting to see her take a bold stand about something, right?
Yeah. I think this is an opportunity for that. I do.
Yeah. I guess just like pragmatically, I'm I feel like if she tried to stand up to Contessa, then Contessa would just be like, here's what happens if you do your plan. Everyone dies. And the whole world explodes.
Yeah, but
do you want to do that, or do you want to do one of my three options?
But my response to that would be, you can't know that. Not for sure.
And she'd be like, yeah, I can.
No, I don't believe
Well,
you.
yeah, I mean, with the blind spots and everything, you're right. So like that's the thing, is because nobody's taking Sveta's side, there is nobody there to be like, but what about the blind spots? But what about the fact that she could be lying? But what about the fact that this could be a distraction? But what, like, Kenzie, did I say Kenzie? Sveta has some great points. But everyone is like shell shocked, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, talking just about the writing, is what this chapter does a really good job of, is showing that how shell shocked Victoria is. That like we talked earlier about how passive she is, and from the Contessa entering the story, I mean, Contessa literally jumps into the story and like rips agency from everyone and just starts ordering everyone around in a way that they become completely passive. And Victoria herself just kind of falls into it. Like as we move into the latter half of the book, where she's setting up her big trap for Custodian, our main character is like trying to come up with like questions to ask, or reasons why, or ways to feel. And while all that's happening, she's just doing everything that she says. Like, here, hold this dog. Okay, here, go over here. Okay. And she just just totally resigned to all of it in a way that is like, is this kind of like, just like it. Yeah. It's just total, like, it's shell shock.
Yeah, let's move on from discussing the questions specifically, and talk about how, like, the tone there, because so the team meets up with the rest of the Undersiders plus Harbingers and Mortari Capes, and then the next scene is basically, like you said, Contessa setting up her Rube Goldberg machine in the background, just kind of giving orders: fill that elevator shaft with water, take this dog, stand over there, use the force field when this happens. Kenzie, here are the passwords. Like, just kind of, and we know exactly what she's doing, and I think Victoria does too. Like, she's setting up the pieces for what's about to happen. And it does have this really interesting tone where the Breakthrough members are just kind of like wandering around, passively following the orders while they think and talk about the question that's been put to them.
Yeah. It's really, it is really like a testament to the ability of this book and its author to handle tone here, where you just kind of feel this lost, spacey floatiness in the writing itself. Like, you just feel like if this was a movie, the sound would kind of be muted. Like, the Saving Private Ryan, like, ringing explosion noise, where he kind of just spaces out and you hear the pitched noise and all the other noise is muted. That's kind of the feeling I get from the writing, that exact way they depicted shell shock in that movie. I think that just the way things are described just captured that to me.
Yeah. Exactly. It's great, and it's upsetting. Like, you're like mad. You're like mad at the book because you're like, Contessa's supposed to fix everything.
Right. Yeah.
And and you along with the characters are just in this like, oh no.
Yeah, and I think it plays off of our emotions in that way, right? Because yeah, of course Contessa was never going to fix everything. We're talking about Contessa, Matt. This is the person who started Cauldron. Like it was never going to be like a cool, like, oh, this is easy, yay, we did it. Like it was never going to be that. But in our desperation, after watching some of the most powerful characters get the shit kicked out of them, after watching the team that we love suffer, and even their wins felt like losses, after watching all these stuff, all we wanted was someone to come in with an easy I win button, and we were given that only to have it flipped on its head. And I think that is a wonderful kind of bait and switch of the writing that I think just works to make this feel more impactful, make this hurt harder, and make this more frustrating. And I understand, like, I understand people reading this and being super frustrated with the book. I get that. I think that's what the book wants you to do.
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is one of those moments when I appreciate the book challenging me rather than taking what I think of as like a fan fiction approach of like, how do I make this fun? It's like, oh, this isn't going to be fun. This is going to be painful. Mm-hmm. And that's the fact that Wildbow is willing to take it there is what makes me love this story. Yeah.
And you know, I don't know what's going to happen with these choices. There's a part of me that super respects a story that takes 3 impossible choices like this and doesn't blink on it, doesn't give an easy out, doesn't like have a thing pop in and say, actually, hello, my name is New Cape, and my name is option D.
Right.
And like I appreciate that. Like, I think one of the things, you know, speaking of, I enjoy the movie Age of Ultron. I think it's a good movie, and I think it's like unnecessarily hated in the MCU. But one of the things that really frustrates me about that movie is they set up this beautiful dilemma in that the Avengers had to choose whether or not to blow up this chunk of land in the sky, killing a bunch of people but saving the world, or letting it crash into the ground and killing everybody. And that's a tough dilemma for heroes to do. And then the movie gives them a helicarrier showing up that magically solves all their problems, and removes that dilemma from the characters. And I don't think that's what the story is going to do, and I respect it for not doing that.
Yeah. We'll see though. So the team writes down their answers, and they, well, we don't see their votes, but they write down their answers anyway.
Yeah, if we saw their votes, the whole game we played would have been considerably less interesting.
Yes.
I do like that not everyone does this, but Victoria writes hers down on her hand. And I like the symbolic nature of like the choices literally in their hands. As she writes her choice on her hand. That's really
Love
good.
It.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the blood is on their hands.
Sure.
Conversely.
Sure. Yeah. Did she write in red ink? I don't remember.
I don't know. So then the custodian collapses a vast part of the facility around them. It's pretty awesome. Everybody's basically fine because of the Contessa maneuvering. But now they are isolated in a large open space, completely surrounded by armed thralls.
Yeah. I think this is cool. The explosion is really cool because, they're completely unharmed. Everything works perfectly. And I think this is like a really great moment where we're leaving this chapter and this decision on our characters' heads. And then just for fun, Wildbow goes, okay, you have to make this choice. But once again, here's a reminder of how fucking awesome this chick is. Like, she just saved all your lives via her power here. So it's like, you might have doubts about the situation, but here's an example of exactly why she's as powerful as she says she is.
Right. It's a great punctuation mark. I love it.
Yeah.
And then she turns to them and badassedly is like, make up your minds.
Yep.
And then, commences fighting hundreds of people.
I agree. Yeah.
All right. That was that. A couple of awesome chapters, a classic Wildbow moral dilemma.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say that there haven't been moral dilemmas in this book, but I don't think they've felt as like clearly like confusion inducing as this one in a while.
Yeah. I should say trilemma, actually.
There you go. Yeah. There you go.
Because it is. All right. So the discussion question from last week was, describe an example of a time when a Wildbow character undergoes change without the character themselves realizing it. And I was really, really happy with the answers because I hadn't really thought of these, but I think, yeah. So Sarah Penguin says, Parian starts off as someone who hates conflict and avoids making her needs known. Her trigger event is basically about avoiding conflict and not making her needs known. In Ward, though, Parian insists that Tattletale make amends for for using Rain as cradle bait, and tells Victoria to stop her be a hero sales pitch. She's also able to fight Nursery without undue panicking. So in the background, Parian has become more accustomed to conflict.
Yeah, that's
I like that.
I never would have thought of that, but that's really true.
Yeah.
Megafire does an interesting thing here. He talks about Defiant, and the first time I saw the word Defiant, I immediately assumed that we were referring to the character change he makes by the end of the story. But I like Megafire's answer a lot here. Defiant went on a long rant about him and Mannequin are nothing alike, and then he proceeded to turn himself into a cyborg. And even with other characters pointing it out to him, he never quite acknowledges it. And this is great, because, yeah, I mean, it's like, this is a change that he was undergoing, before his turn at the end of the story to become a better person. But
yeah,
I think that is absolutely true, that the irony of that situation was wonderful.
Yeah, I think irony is exactly the right word. Yeah. Beard of Valor talks about Ashley as someone who has tried to do everything on her own and who now asks for what she needs from others, accepts responsibility, and even accepts orders from trusted friends.
Yeah, and I wonder if she would acknowledge the change. That's a good thing to think about. Would she, if you asked her, hey Ashley, how have you changed over the course of these last 15 arcs? Would she say, oh, well, here's blah, blah, blah? Or would she say, I haven't changed at all. I'm the same person I've always been. I'm just fucking awesome. And you all know it. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely the case of the existing damsel clone to act as a contrast.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't know. This is an interesting question.
Yeah. Chariago says Lily. Lily is quick to shut down Rain's suggestion of personality bleed through, but we know from May's interlude that her cluster absolutely has bleed through. Yeah, that's a good kind of literal interpretation. I like that.
So it's basically just a case of Lily is completely in denial about the fact that her personality has changed.
Yep.
Personality changed because she absorbed May's seriousness.
Yep.
At least that's May's take, and I kind of took that at face value. I don't
think there's any reason to doubt that.
Yeah. Lost Man 138 says Rain has ironically become the good soldier that the Fallen wanted him to be.
Ooh.
He follows orders, he cuts his hair short, he doesn't complain, and he kicks ass. Under Victoria's leadership, he even makes a good soldier instead of just a good soldier.
I like that a lot. That's really clever.
Cool.
Data Snake 69 nice says Lisa uniquely fails to notice that she's changed for the better. Take her conversation with Taylor in 19.7. In the past 48 hours, Lisa has outsmarted a criminal mastermind, helped save a small child from a lifetime of slavery, figured out that the Triumvirate was involved with Cauldron, proven that she understands the powers of Faultline's crew better than Faultline herself, and come up with a way for humanity to evacuate when the world ends. And in her own words, I still feel like the stupid, self-obsessed little child who let her big brother die. You know what's sadder than someone who refuses to change for the better? Someone who actually does it, but can't tell.
That sentence alone makes me glad that I chose this question.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
And finally, Wanson says Love Lost and Snag at least temporarily changed when Cradle gave them his tokens, and they sure didn't realize it.
That is true.
It's a major plot point that they didn't realize it. or I guess you could say they sort of realized it, but they sort of misattributed it entirely.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting one. Cool. So the new discussion question for this week is which option do you choose and why?
Guys, here's the time. Come up with the best option and explain why you picked it.
Yep.
We ran a poll on our Twitter and saw what people chose. So it seems like it was a very contentious race between C and B on the poll. So I'm interested to see what our listeners that typically write into the discussion question choose here.
Yeah. All right. That's all we got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You can reach out to us via our email account at gotwormpod@gmail.com or on our Twitter at gotwormpod. Twitter is also a great place to follow us for show schedule changes and announcements and that kind of thing. The last 2 weeks, it's been a little weird. So you can follow us there just to know if anything weird's happening. You can also follow my personal Twitter at ScottDaily85 and Matt's is at Mordinamail.
Yeah. And, if you want to catch schedule changes, you can always go to doofmedia.com/calendar, by the way. That's generally kept quite up to date.
Yeah,
thank you to Scott for doing that.
Actually, that's Elise. Thank you to my wonderful wife for working very hard to keep our calendar up to date. We really appreciate it.
Thank you to Elise too. And if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we recommend you do so. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and anywhere else that you can listen to podcasts.
And as always, you can find this and all the other shows we do over at our website, doofmedia.com, especially our newest show, Media MD. Go check that out. Please do.
Yeah.
I think you guys
seriously.
will like it.
Just again, scroll through. They certainly will have covered a show that you are interested in. They're really funny. They have a great dynamic, and I love. Once you start listening, you'll understand kind of the basis of the show, and I think it's a really cool idea. So yeah, if you want to support Media MD or any other Doof show, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you cool bonuses like the ability to vote in our fan art contests, Q&A sessions with me and Scott, and maybe others at some point.
Yeah.
And access to live streams of our recording sessions where you can hang out with other Parahumans fans in the chat. Mm-hmm. And of course, our excellent Discord chat where you can hang out with those people all day. And as always, make sure you head over to Wildbow's Patreon at patreon.com/wildbow and donate to him as well, because this is his world. We are just faced with moral dilemmas in it.
Oof.
And this week, special thanks to new patrons, Bidoofs at the $1 level, James N., Matthew M., and Pavlos P. Appreciate that, y'all. Thank you so much. And then new Doof Troop member, Seer Graug, who has upgraded to the $10 level. Thanks, Seer Graug.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. And new Doof Warrior, Jay Maniac, who has upgraded to the $20 level. Thank you, everyone. As always, I'm flattered and honored.
Yeah, and we are just like 3 dozen patrons away from our next goal, which is our Dark Tower episode, our Dark Tower show, where we're going to dive real deep into Stephen King's magnum opus. So if you are at all interested in that show and you are not already a patron, it's never been a better time. Help us do that. I'm very excited about that show, and we're so close. So
yeah.
Thanks, guys, for everything you do. We only do this because of you, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And if you cannot afford to donate right now, that's of course okay. There are tons of ways to help us out. You can share the podcast on your social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere. And you can, of course, always help us out by heading on over to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, or, frankly, if there's any other podcatcher applications out there that also let you leave reviews, do it there too. And then email me and tell me where it is so it doesn't take me 2 years to find your review. This week, we have a review from Martian Maneater, who gives us 5 stars and says, this is a long one, guys. So, phenomenal analysis that really hits the spot. As someone who read Worm at least 13 times before listening to this podcast, yes, I know, that's a lot of times. I've always lamented that too few of my friends are willing to read and discuss this amazing book, and even fewer want to dive into a critical analysis of the text. Matt and Scott combed through Worm with an even finer, more honed comb than I. It really served to show how beneficial it is to discuss rich texts with people who view things differently, and how many wonderful, subtle threads different perspectives can highlight. I've loved every minute of disagreement or revelation that We've Got Worm Ward has brought to my ears. It turns out the tailor may have done some things wrong, but it really chafes to admit it. The biggest benefit to listening to We've Got Ward while reading Ward at the same pace is that I am constantly in mind of just how unreliable the narrator is. This is an old review, so I'm not sure how I feel about that anymore, but I understand your point. I love the doubt that this casts on perspectives and weight of importance a given narrator will read into various details and events. I love that this podcast throws even more light on the complex details and life that Wibbleblow writes into each character, setting, and scene. This podcast made me feel like someone else understands the investment and internal screaming that I go through with each new intense moment in Ward. We've Got Ward is an excellent way to enjoy these delicious facts. No one is okay. Everyone is a time bomb. Shards are jerks. Superpowers don't fix problems they are trying to solve. Womble Mild drops hints in the background 10 arcs ago, and you really need Scott to point it out to you because you missed it on your first read-through. And lastly, oh no. Listen to this podcast and dive in with its community to really revel in your need to share the excitement of Wild Child stories with other people who are just as invested as you are. If you enjoy breaking things down with a critical perspective while never stopping the emotional roller coaster, this is the podcast for you. Whew, Martian Maneater. That was an essay, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's very touching. It's always happy to have brought enough enjoyment into someone's life that they are feel compelled to write that nice of a compliment for us.
Yeah, my face is all red right now, and I don't know how to deal with it. I can't take compliments, but I so appreciate you, Martian Maneater, and everyone else, everyone that has left us a review, everyone that listens, everyone that disagrees with us and agrees with us. I'm sure there's going to be both of those things this week. We appreciate all of you. Yes,
and we welcome it. That's it for this week's show. We'll be back next week at our normal time our normal.
I did it again.
with our normal number of chapters, weirdly. Anyway, more arc 15.
Oh, I love this arc.